Whether because of plot holes, cheap plot devices, or just good old-fashioned mediocrity, it's easy to fall into a rabbit hole discussing all the reasons why and how a story fails to stick the landing. Even worse is when an ending wraps things up in such a way that the entire story ultimately doesn't really matter. If the outcome was inevitable, then what have we been doing this whole time? Why did we devote hours to something that doesn't go anywhere? Then there are the games that have perfectly fine endings. They're cohesive, wrap up all the loose ends, and maybe even have a satisfying twist. But then you really start thinking about what the world looks like going forward. Happy or sad, any ending has implications, and sometimes inevitable consequences. And the more you consider it, the more you realize these characters you've been growing with all this time are in for a rude awakening. There's simply no avoiding it. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video game endings that get worse the more you think about them. Number 10. Blessing of Despair, Elden Ring. Blessing of Despair is one of the endings in Elden Ring with the lowest requirements, befitting the fact that you unlock it by completing the questline for a character called the Dung Eater. The fact that he appears as a red phantom, something all Souls players will recognize as bad news, is a pretty good indicator that nothing good will come from helping him. The Dung Eater tasks you with tracking down several seedbed curses, disgusting growths that sprout out from the bodies of his former victims. He's a nasty guy obsessed with disgusting filth and suffering, but it's unclear if he's cursed to be this way or if it's just who he is. Regardless, by fulfilling his plans, you effectively afflict everyone in the entire lands between with his seedbed curse, which not only causes them agonizing pain in life, but also traps their souls in eternal torment. That's everyone, forever. All people from now on will be born and die with this curse, causing generations of death and decay until there are no people left, only souls suffering for eternity. And the worst part? Yes, there's a worst part. This apparently accomplishes nothing. It's evil for the sake of evil. Number 9. Nothing You Do Matters, Mass Effect 3. It's no secret that Mass Effect 3's original ending before being expanded by developer BioWare was, well, bad. After 3 games being told how much your choices mattered, in the end they really didn't. You were presented with 3 options: destroy the antagonist Reapers, bring them under your control, or fuse organic and synthetic life, ending the repeated cycle of organic versus AI conflict. They seem like very different choices, but in terms of what the game actually shows us, the biggest difference between them was just the color of the magic laser beam that somehow does one of these 3 things. No matter what you chose, the galaxy was left in a sorry state. Just about every civilization was brought to ruin, but especially Earth, where the final battle took place. The mass relays that enabled faster-than-light space travel were severely damaged, if not destroyed outright, and even our beloved crew was left stranded on some jungle planet with no means of going anywhere. Basically, all 3 endings resulted in exactly what you spent 3 games trying to prevent: the total destruction of organic life. Only now it'll take a generation or 2 of desperate struggle. Number 8. Welcome to 52,000 AD, Portal 2. Valve fans rejoiced when Half-Life Easter eggs from Portal were explicitly integrated into the flagship series at the end of Half-Life 2 Episode 2. It was clear that Episode 3 was going to involve Portal's Aperture Industries in some significant way. When Portal 2 was announced, we assumed it would continue the shared continuity between these 2 games. But with Episode 3 never materializing, how was Portal 2 going to continue that narrative without stepping on potential future Half-Life games? For better or worse, they found a workaround. Set Portal 2 so far in the future that the events of the Half-Life games are irrelevant. In Portal 2, protagonist Shell wakes up from cryosleep 50,000 years after the events of the first game. This means that at the end of the game, when Shell finally escapes the subterranean testing facility, she's walking into a considerably unrecognizable world. In fairness, this one could go either way. Maybe in that time humans have created a planet-wide utopia. Or what if the evil alien Combine definitively defeated humanity and now rules the world without opposition? How have extraterrestrial beasts introduced to Earth multiplied and evolved? Shell could very likely be walking into a neo-primordial Earth populated by cosmic monstrosities. Could go either way. Number 7. A good time to be a bad guy, Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption made big waves in the space of game narratives when it ended on a tragic but impactful denouement. After sacrificing himself for his family, John Marston dies in a hail of gunfire while his wife and child escape the besieged family ranch. The game then picks up years after its climax for one final mission, now playing as John's once gentle and kind-hearted son Jack. Here you seek out and kill the man responsible for his father's death, sending Jack down the same outlaw path as his father. But where this gets really bad is when you consider the time frame we're dealing with. Jack begins his outlaw life in 1914 at the age of 19. The Wild West is basically dead by this point. World War I is about to start. Prohibition is right around the corner, and with it, an explosion of organized crime. Jack is likely to end up embroiled in one, the other, or both. On one hand, in his physical prime, disillusioned and angry at the law for destroying his family, a decadent and ultra-violent life of crime awaits him. On the other, it's the second most destructive war in human history. It's hard to imagine how Jack gets any kind of happy ending here. Number 6, worst time loop ever, Legacy of Kane Defiance. The culmination of the two branches of the Legacy of Kane series, Blood Omen and Soul Reaver, Defiance finally wrapped up the saga of the protagonist's vendetta against his former master and fellow protagonist Kane in a satisfying and unexpected way. After chasing each other across time for 3 games, the saga finally ended with Raziel sacrificing himself for Kane, enabling him to be the true hero he was meant to be before Breaking Bad. This frees him to focus on the true threat facing the world, the demonic Hilden, thus perfectly setting up the plot of Blood Omen 2, a previous game in the franchise's release calendar. Arguably the worst in the series, Blood Omen 2 was made by a different team who riddled the story with massive plot holes. This still retroactively put the burden on Defiance to somehow justify those plot holes, resulting in the creation of a time loop. Presumably, the next game would have involved breaking that loop, but we'll never know since we have to take Defiance's ending as the only ending. So we didn't really accomplish anything. Our heroes achieve a temporary Pyrrhic victory that leads directly into a game where the bad guys already won. And such a bad game too. Number 5, Nothing Changes, Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Considering it's been 5 years since the release of Middle-earth: Shadow of War and we've not heard a peep about a sequel, it looks unlikely that we'll see this radical spin on the Lord of the Rings mythos again. By the end of the war, protagonist Talion has been abandoned by the ghost of Celebrimbor, the creator of the Rings of Power, and left to die. Driven by vengeance, Celebrimbor manages to fuse with Sauron, engaging him in a psychic battle for control of Mordor. Talion is revived as a ring wraith, and the two wage a civil war for control of Mordor. All of this to set up the post-game, which only existed to push microtransactions for what felt like endless hours of grind. If you complete the post-game, you get an epilogue explaining that Talion turned heel and joined the Witch King, only for him and Celebrimbor/Sauron to be destroyed along with the One Ring. And that raises so many questions. With a Nazgul fighting Celebrimbor, did Sauron take control again? What about Talion's orc armies? All we have is a future where our protagonist turns into a random villain who dies off screen. As for Celebrimbor, he's eventually defeated by Sauron, and then the movies just happen as normal. What was the point? Number 4, This World Sucks Now, Dishonored: Death of the Outsider. Dishonored and Dishonored 2 are two of the best games of their generation, which is why it was so surprising when developer Arcane Studios announced they were done with the series. To drive the point home, they released Dishonored 2's DLC, Death of the Outsider. Playing as Billy Lurk, a previously unplayable character with a storied and complicated role in the series, you're tasked with doing the impossible, killing the Outsider, the enigmatic spirit who grants powers to people and watches how they use them with idle curiosity. He basically throws a huge magic wrench into major events just to see what'll happen. Those powers are also your main mechanics. With no outsider and no powers, there's no games. At the end of this DLC, you'll find the outsider's mortal body and can choose to kill him or free him from his tether to the void, the dark dimension where his slightly sociopathic spirit resides. Why is this so bad? Because, just as he would have previously argued, the world is boring without him. Without the outsider, the Dishonored world is too much like ours, rapidly succumbing to the destruction of the environment and featuring massive wealth disparity. How poignant, I guess? Number 3, just downright confusing, Far Cry 5. Far Cry 5 is one of the more inconsistent entries in the series. The story of a doomsday cult taking over an entire county in Montana and somehow keeping it a secret is a stretch, even by the standards of this over-the-top series. And its infamous ending is an even bigger stretch. After defeating his lieutenants, your character and their allies finally defeat cult leader Joseph Seed. As they're preparing to take him into custody, a nuclear bomb goes off in the distance, proving that Seed was right about his apocalyptic prophecy. The game ends with Joseph taking you prisoner in a bunker. Surely this will have consequences for every future game. They just destroyed the world. How on earth is Far Cry 6 going to... Oh, what? It ignores it entirely? Oh, alright. We got a follow-up in the form of a mediocre spin-off, New Dawn, but by Far Cry 6, nothing that happened in 5 mattered. Is it even canon? The ending obviously isn't. All your cute animal sidekicks annihilated, and that's to say nothing of the prophecy, confirming that fate is real, apparently. This gets worse the more you think about it because the writers clearly didn't. Number 2. What is the plan here? Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. The Force Unleashed 2 takes a hard turn away from canon when, at the end, Darth Vader is captured by the Rebel Alliance. With the series almost certainly gone forever, this raises one huge question. What is the plan here exactly? Let's play this through. Good job, you have Vader contained in this Hannibal Lecter contraption. Now you have to take him somewhere and contain him, the second most powerful Force user in the galaxy. You could dismantle his cybernetic parts and contain him in Bacta, but again, how do you do this safely? At the end of Revenge of the Sith, we saw him tear a room apart with a loud yell, so is restricting his movement really gonna be enough? And even if you do contain him, it's not like you're gonna make him talk. If somehow you do, what could he really provide? But at least you find out he's Anakin Skywalker, war hero of the very republic you're trying to restore, and that's not gonna win you many fans. But at least you'll find out he's Anakin Skywalker, war hero of the very republic you're trying to restore, that's not going to win you many fans. Also, the Emperor is either going to replace him immediately or send Sith assassins to track him down relentlessly. This was not thought through. Number 1. Forever War, Far Cry 4. Far Cry 4 sees protagonist AJ joining an uprising against a megalomaniac dictator who lives a life of wild excess while his people struggle. The uprising has leadership problems, however, in the form of a tug-of-war between its two commanders, the conservative Sabal and the more progressive Amita. But don't let the simplified political labels fool you. Both are deeply flawed with highly questionable ethics. Ultimately, it's up to you to decide who leads the country at the end of the game. If Sabal rules, he transforms the nation into a fundamentalist patriarchy where women are denied basic human rights. If Amita leads, she turns the country into an authoritarian drug state, where farmers are exploited to produce narcotics and children are conscripted into the military. Furthermore, based on previous events in the game involving the CIA, the country is primed for US intervention. The player does have a third choice: kill whomever you choose. But in that vacuum of power, you're likely condemning the country for years of civil war, as various new factions compete for power. Any way you look at it, it's not looking good. That's the end of our list, but do let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any more examples of video game endings that get worse the more you think about them. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonnell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.